Okay, so like I said, I don't want the videos to be too long because I tend to get a bit winded with talking about education. But I consider myself to be an average student. I have strengths and weaknesses, just like everybody else. In some subjects, I'm better at than others, just like everybody else. And there's variation within that because I don't really care for math. I didn't like algebra, but algebra 2 and trigonometry was good. Geometry was also good. Now, I didn't like college algebra, but statistics was good. But I think it also depends on the instructor. Anyway, same thing with certain science courses. Um, Social science is just, I don't know, it gets me. And I think that after like taking all of those courses, it was one course that had me hooked, but I hadn't changed my major just yet. I waited to like see to try to stick it out. But yeah, I decided to change my mind. And I remember this one biology teacher I had. He was like, "Oh, some students they major in certain things to appease their parents basically, but I didn't major in biology to appease anybody. I did that on my own doing. I wanted to Biology was the safe route in terms of like a career because as I stated, like I wanted, well, I don't know, maybe I didn't state it. I've recorded this several times, so in the previous videos I did state it, but I wanted to be a general surgeon. That's why I was in a medical program in high school, but I I had a change of heart and I wanted to go the psychology route. But at the last minute, like before I declared my major for school, I went back to bio, like the safe option, because doctors usually always have a job, generally speaking, because of the medical field. Anyway, but that I did it for my own doing, not for anybody else's. But I don't know. Social science was something, or social sciences in general. I feel like I belong in, and that's when I would say I went from I guess an average student to exceptional, in my opinion. I became a better student in college for sure. Um, but changing my major when I felt like I found a place where I belong, that's when um, everything just sort of like that. Um, yeah. So I did that. I finished school. Um, yeah, my last 2 years were very good. The first 2 years were like, and that's because being a bio major in a science discipline and the STEM fields in general, I didn't feel like there's sufficient support for people who look like me in the STEM fields for various reasons. But anyway, I don't know. I felt seen, if that makes sense, in a social science discipline. So yeah, um, that's what happened with my collegiate education. It's a bit more detailed than that, but that's as detailed as I'll go. And I wanted to go to grad school, and I had did an independent study. So I applied to graduate programs all in New York because I wanted to be in New York, and that's a stressful process. And then applying to graduate programs in the States in general. Like some programs may have waiver fees, most not, but the fees to apply is expensive, and then you have to take the GRE depending on what program you're interested in, or you might have to take the GMAT. And if you're going to medical school, the MCAT. And if you're going to pharmacy school, the PCAT, etc., etc. But I took the GRE for graduate school. Um, And there was this one school I really wanted to go to. I think I got caught up. Actually, not. I think I know. I got caught up in the name because the program, it wasn't what I expected. Being in New York wasn't what I expected either. I have a love-hate relationship with New York, and if you know me personally, then you know that. Now, anyway, because what I thought it would be and what it was, totally different things. And that's kind of how it was with this school that I attended the first time I went to graduate school. So I did that. I completed my my first graduate degree, and after some time, I went back home to Chicago, and I wasn't there long. Um, I came back to New York, and then I took a break from school after the first graduate degree. I wanted to get experience. And my employment adventures were pretty interesting, to say the least. Like my first real job after I graduated was in the social service sector, and I wasn't interested in social services, and my background is not really education-wise anyway. It's not in the social service sector. I mean, there are some similarities between social anthro and then like social service degrees like social work, but they're also very different. But a lot of the employment opportunities in New York are very social work intense, social work heavy. If you're seeking employment in New York, you're gonna encounter a lot of social service jobs, a lot of social work positions, whether it's an actual social work position for a social worker. It's gonna be case management, this caseworker, that mental health support worker, this peer support worker, residential support worker, this and that. All of that falls under the social work umbrella, and that's just how it is here. And I've been here for quite a while, so I know how it is just living here and then seeking employment here. So social work intense position. I was a case manager the first time, and I did that for a few years. But I didn't want to do that anymore because I knew my end result would be a PhD. I wanted to do research, but initially I wasn't so sure of what discipline I wanted to go into, because from sociology and anthropology I went to sociology, and I chose sociology because, as I mentioned before, my undergraduate program was very anthro heavy, and that's just because most of the professors who fell under sociology and anthropology, they were anthropologists. So it wasn't that many sociologists in the SOA discipline. I can't say how it is now, although I still talk to some of them. But back then, when I was in school, that's how. Ain't that old, so I'm talking about back then. But the breakdown then, that's how it was. It was very anthro intensive, and most of the courses that I was drawn to based on like the description, they were anthro based. Of course, I did take some sociology courses. I didn't like them as much. So I wanted that sociological experience. So I decided to major in sociology for my first graduate degree. Not what I expected, and I didn't like it. So I completed the program, got my degree. That's when I acquired so much debt. Attending school in New York, out of state tuition, although it was a private school, but the tuition was a lot, and then no funding. Most graduate programs, they don't fund master students, most, not all. But I did have a scholarship from undergraduate that rolled over that helped to like reduce what I would have to take out, but not yeah, it didn't do it did a bit, but not a whole lot. So that's how I went from SOA to sociology to being in a social service, employment sector field type of situation. Then not wanting to be there anymore. But around 2016, I would say, is when I knew I wanted to focus on criminology. I wasn't interested in criminal justice per se, but criminology. Criminal justice and criminology, they're similar but a bit different. But I wanted to do criminology. And before going to school again, I felt like I needed experience in that field, or at least the criminal justice field. And then once I had that experience, I would be able to apply to research programs in criminology. Thinking back on it, if I could redo it over again, I wouldn't have done that. So once in 2016, if I could have a restart right now, once I knew I wanted to do criminology, instead of attempting to gain experience in that field, I would have just said, okay, I'm going back to school, and I would have applied to criminology programs in 2016. Because I stopped working at my first job in 2017, but I went to a BS job right after. It was bullshit, complete and utter bullshit. And then after that, it was some intensified bullshit. So after my first job, it wasn't the greatest, but it was a lot of things that happened afterwards that it was too much. People are crazy. And sometimes I used to say, I would do a podcast on the things that I've seen at those places. The third one was worse than the second one, way worse. But yeah, if I could redo it in 2016, I would have just applied for PhD or research programs, PhD programs in criminology to start in 2017. That's what I would have done instead of working a bit more and then trying to find jobs within that field. So that's like the brief overview of my experience from pre-K to my first graduate degree, and then my first real job and figuring out life, and like deciding that I wanted to pursue criminology. And then if I could redo everything over, I would have just applied to PhD programs, instead of trying to gain experience in that field before applying to PhD programs. But everything happens for a reason, and basically this is my journey as it stands. So now I'm gonna end this, and then I'm gonna talk about employment, and then basically how I got to where I am now.